Hello whiskey fans, welcome back. Summer is approaching, or at least it is at the time when I'm recording this, so I decided to buy a cheap, available bottle of whiskey to put into mixers and to offer to guests who perhaps aren't as discerning in their whiskey taste as you and I, which led me to one of the cheapest whiskies that we can get here in the UK, which, from my memory, was fairly decent, and that's Ballantine's Finest. So, if you're getting a little bit of deja vu, this is a re-review here on this channel. I have reviewed this before, probably in my first year of Whiskey Tube, so going up for 5 years ago now, believe it or not. But I have reviewed this before, so go back and have a look at my previous review if you want a little bit of comparison about how I think this has changed. Although I will warn you that that review is probably old enough to be Whiskey Lock pre-hat. So I think the reason I bought my previous bottle of this is probably the same reason as I bought this one, because it's something cheap that's fairly neutral, that goes well in mixers or in a tumbler with ice for guests perhaps, or maybe just when you want something where you don't have to think about it too much. And I'll be honest, I've always quite liked Ballantines for that purpose. Along with Johnnie Walker Red Label, controversially, I think of these cheap, very economical blends as more like OB grain whiskey rather than a blend, because they are both so grain heavy that they might as well be classed as grains. And I think that very high grain recipe, if you're lucky, can give you something which is very gentle and refined and decent in its own way, or at least that used to be the case. Another reason why I was doing a re-review of this is because I've had a look at some other reviews in the last few years since I bought my previous bottle, and I noticed that a lot of people are getting some very different tasting notes to mine. A lot of people are noticing harsh, very immature, unpleasant notes in this, which certainly wasn't the case with my previous bottle. But it's entirely possible that that has changed since then, because I think my previous review that I did nearly 5 years ago, I probably had that bottle for 5 years by the time I reviewed it. So a lot of years have passed between the time when I purchased this in summer 2025 compared to my previous one, which was probably nearly 10 years ago. So Ballantine's Finest, it is, of course, a blended Scotch whisky, so it's at least one single malt and at least one grain whisky. It's produced by Pernod Ricard. The presentation of this on the outside with a label in the bottle is basically unchanged for decades now. It's a very traditional, very recognisable presentation. It's a 700ml bottle. You can get it for under £20 here in the UK. I paid £18 for this. So for that price, it's very cheap, but we don't necessarily expect much. It's very much not on the same tier as an Ardnamurchan or a Kilchoman or a Lockleigh. It's just not that kind of whiskey. And I think that you need to recalibrate your judgment when you're going into something like this. And I think part of that is that you just can't expect something at this price point to be natural colour or non-chill filtered. It's not for that kind of market. It just won't be. I think that my biggest disappointment with this Ballantine's Finest, though, is that they dropped that amazing screw top that they used to have. If you remember my previous review, or if you've bought Ballantines over the last few years, you might remember that it had this really amazing little sort of multi-part screw top that had a little plastic compression gland in it, which is a really neat idea and seemed really promising. I'd have loved to have seen that design put onto a lot more whiskey. Sadly, they have gone back to a standard pressed steel screw top with a plain gasket in the top. So I think that's a real shame. But while we've got the top off, let's get some in the glass and see what it's like. Natural colour, I would bet, I don't think that is natural colour, and I would bet that they put probably quite a small amount of caramel colouring in that. I would bet that that's not natural colour. I would guess that when this comes out of the casks, it's probably Probably very close to clear or almost entirely clear. But there you go. Ballantine's finest on the nose. Vanilla, icing sugar, quite sweet, quite neutral. A little bit of a bakery note, like sweet bakery goods, pancakes with sugar and lemon. I definitely don't think that was there before. I think that it's always been a light and neutral whiskey, but I don't remember that kind of doughy pancake and sugary lemon note. Slightly bitter and more than enough harshness on there. More than a little harshness that really catches you in the sinus, which, considering this is 40%, it really shouldn't be doing that. A little bit of a whiff of acetone, but quite cakey, quite mild, sweet bakery smells, more pancakes, brioche. It really dips in and out of pleasant and harsh. One second you're getting icing sugar, then you're getting acetone, then you're getting bakery, then you're just getting immature crap spirit that's been in crap casks. But then it phases into that sweet and vanilla and sugary, and then it's back to paint stripper. It's very much a Jekyll and Hyde whiskey. Let's see how it tastes. More vanilla and a little bit of coconut. Kind of tired cask notes. I love refill casks. I think that refill casks are wonderful if you're going to mature your whiskey long term and have that patience. But there is a point of no return where a cask really should be giving its pension and allowed to rest and retire. And I think that the casks that I've used for this, they are really pushing it. Quite a bitterness on the palate of this one. Bitter, dead casks, slightly planky, just dry, dead oak. And again, more acetone. Definitely a proper refill bourbon note on this one. Spirity, but with a faint sweetness. Also getting a little bit of nuttiness, coconut, as I said before, and a little bit of the note of raw peanuts with the skin still on. And just an indistinct sweetness, like a little bit of an icing sugar sweetness. I would say that the palate is slightly better than the nose, but on both you get probably a similar profile to what I remember, but you just get this immaturity butting in repeatedly, reminding you that it's an £18 whiskey. One more sip and look at the finish. Again, smooth, sweet, icing sugar, just with a background bitterness and that raw, spirity alcohol nip. I actually think that sugary, sort of sugar and lemon pancake note is actually quite beautiful and really surprising and quite unique. Didn't expect to find that, and that was a low amount of joy in this very... It's gone downhill. I think it's not as good as it used to be. It is rougher and harsher and younger. I think they've cheaped out a bit, and it was always incredibly neutral and light, but it didn't have this harshness and bitterness. It just used to be better than this. But that sugar lemon pancake note, that's really quite special. A little moment of joy, a little oasis in the desert that is this Ballantines whiskey. I don't know if that sugar lemon pancake note is a common thing to Ballantines or if it's just a peculiarity of this batch, but I do actually like that quite a lot. Sadly, there's also a lot more raw alcohol and immaturity to this, which really spoils the experience. And I really don't think that used to be the case. I think that this Ballantines finest, I wonder what their worst is like. Ho ho. I think it's still a good cheap blend if you're looking for something inoffensive, because it is very, very cheap. If you want something that will disappear into a highball or play nice with ice, then this is probably going to be great. It's still better than something like Hague Club. It's better than your famous Grouse. It's definitely harsher, less polished, and just a bit rougher all round and not quite as well made as my last bottle though. I still think it has interesting and pleasant sides to it, but it's just about crossing the line of what I would enjoy sipping neat, and I probably wouldn't be rushing out to buy another bottle anytime soon. I think if you are looking for something gentle and mild, which ironically I think can be a bit of an acquired taste for a lot of whiskey enthusiasts, because those words are kind of a sin to a lot of malt enthusiasts. But if you can appreciate those kind of more beginner notes and you're looking for something in that style, then rather than this, I'd probably recommend looking for maybe an independently bottled grain whiskey from bourbon or refill casks, maybe a Johnny Walker Red on offer, or perhaps a VAT 69, or maybe an older bottling of Ballantines from auction if you use the secondary market anyway, because this stuff did used to be better. And I'm sure if you get a bottle of this from the 90s or 80s, it's probably even better than what I remember. But this current incarnation, it just doesn't feel as recommendable as it did, which I think sadly is probably a little bit of a recurring theme lately. I do think that comparing contemporary bottlings with older ones from your shelf can be a little bit of a Pandora's box, because it can lead to a little bit less enjoyment when you realise that everything's getting a little bit crapper. I think that there are still gems to be found, but I think it's harder than it was a few years ago. And I think from what I can see, there does seem to be a little bit of a downward trajectory when it comes to the quality of the high-end stuff over the last decade, and probably for much, much longer than that when you look at the bottom shelf. Let me know what you think about this, if you've been lucky enough to try it lately. Do you think it's got worse as well? And what are your thoughts on these mild and gentle blends and grain whiskies? And how do you think the quality of standard whiskey is doing in 2025? Because sometimes I feel like it's not going well. It just seems like if you want anything remotely decent, the price that you need to pay for that, apart from a few exceptions, let me know your thoughts. Thanks for joining me. See you next time. Cheers.